Welcome back. In this video, we want to add some simple CSS styles to the data that we are retrieving or that is being sent back to us. So if we try to search for a city, we get this result, but it's not looking very nice. So what we're going to do is, first we're going to put it at the center the text. Then the div holding this text will add a background color to it. Then also we'll just add some stars to the tests inside the div. So let's go back to our project to work on that. Right now we are displaying the data inside this div with ID show weather. So we're going to add some CSS properties to this div using the ID. So we come down here, then we add some CSS properties. Now the first thing we want to add is set the margin to auto, so that it's going to be placed at the center. Then we add a background color, and we're going to use the same background color of 4AA1F3. Then the next thing is we add the color, that is the text color. We set it to white. Also we want to add border radius to the div. Border radius, we'll set it to about 25 pixels. So we have these styles. We set the margin to auto, the background color, the color of the text, then the border radius. Now this CSS properties is applied to this div with this particular ID. Now let's go to our browser, we refresh the page, and let's see. Now this is how it looks. We have these properties and we have the color applied to the div. Now what we want to do now is we are going to add some CSS styles just to make this more bold and a little bit better than the way it is. So we go back. Before that, also we need to add a width. So we don't want it to have 100% width. So we want to reduce the width to make it a little bit smaller than this. So we go back and we give it a width. We can put it here. I'll set the width to 60%. So set the width to 60%. Let's see how it looks now. Okay, it's much better. So set the width to 60%. We are leaving the height. The height is auto. The height is going to increase based on the content inside the div. Now, if we go back to our weather.js, here we're going to add the properties to each of the tags inside the div. So the first property we want to add here is for the name and the country. We're going to change this from p tag to h2. So let's change it to h2 tag. Then the next thing is we add a style, and we'll set the style. We give the font weight, or instead we use double quotes. Font weight to bold. Then we give it a font size. Give it a font size of say 30 pixels. Now another thing we want to do, we want to place it at the center. So we add a class of text center. We add a class of text center. Now we have this. Now let's see how it looks before we start adding other properties. Okay, it's much better now. We have this. So what we're going to do now, we're going to change this to h3 tags, then set a padding left so they will move a little bit to the right. Now to do that, first I will just change all of these p tags to h3 tags. So I'll do that by find and replace. So I'll find all p tags, then change it to h3. So just replace one after the other. are going to have some problems, but I'll fix that myself. So I'll fix that myself. So if I go back here, you can see here have a P tag, change it back to P. So then we go here as well, we'll change it back to P. Then the temperature, we change to P. So we have all of these now. Let's go and make sure that's still the way we want them. Okay, it's giving me win description undefined. Okay, we change this to P tag description pressure as well. So on your own, you could just decide to just change them one after the other, all the P tags. Then let's go back, refresh, and let's see. That's not giving us any undefined. Okay, now the next thing we need to do is we need to add another tag. Here is strong tag, so that this text here will be bold, so we use strong. So I'll do this, just copy and paste all of this here. Then for the other part, the closing tag, we copy and paste that as well. I could just remove this, so I'll just have just description. So I'll paste the code. That is the closing tag for strong. Okay, now we have this. What we want to do is add the styles now to the tag. So the first one is we're adding a padding left. I'm setting the padding left to about 40 pixels. So we have this property now. Let's just copy this and paste it inside all of these H3 tags. Then we go to our browser to see how it looks. Now we save. We've added the styles. We go back here. Okay, this is how it is, but this is not what we really want. Let's go back to fix it. Here I can see the reason why. There's no space here. So change that. Save, then go back, refresh the page. Okay, now we can see how it looks. It's looking much more better than the way it was. So what I want to do now is add padding top to this and also a padding bottom here. So we'll have a padding. Because if I decide to add a padding to this main div, then the div, even if we don't have search for any city, the div will be displayed with no content in it. So we don't want that. We just add padding bottom here and padding top here. So we go back to this current weather. First, let's add the padding bottom. So we'll say padding bottom. Give it 30 pixels. Then let's copy it right here. We place padding top. So padding bottom is going to be padding top. Let's see. So we refresh, and okay, now it's much more better. So we have the current weather with padding top here and padding bottom here as well. So we've added just this simple style. You can style it whichever way you want, so that you can be able to differentiate between this here, the title, and the value itself. So for now, I'll just leave the styles the way they are, and I'll see you in the next video. Hello and welcome back. So what we want to do in this video quickly is just to remove the padding top we added to this footer. So if we go here and we type this, now we can see that we have a lot of padding top here. So what we need to do is add a height to the div or the container that holds this data, then reduce the padding top to this. So we go back inside our current.html. Here in this container div, we're going to add a style. Then we'll set a height to it. Let's set a height of 650 pixels. So we set a height of 650 pixels. Let's put a border so that we'll see the heights. So we go back, we refresh. Now we can see the height that we've added. But here we still see that the padding is we still have a lot of padding top here. So if we search for data, okay, it looks very good. It's contained properly inside the div. But here we need to reduce this padding top. So we go into our style.css. In the show weather properties, or no, inside the footer property, we need to reduce this. Let's reduce it to 100 and let's see how it looks. Now it looks much more better. So the padding top looks much more better. And if we remove the border from this, take out the border and refresh this page. Let's search for a city, and we see that it looks much better now. The padding has been reduced because we added a height to the div. Also, what we can do here, if we click on search, we see that there's no margin top here. So we need to add a margin top to this div, so as there will be a little space between this alert and the div. So we go back to our page. Here we can add a style and set the margin top to 10 pixels. So set the margin top to 10 pixels. We refresh, and okay, the style is not yet applied. So let's see the reason why. We go back to our browser, our project. Okay, instead of adding it here, let's just add inside this div. Then we put a margin bottom. So we just cut that out. Then inside this div, we add a margin bottom. So set this to margin bottom. So we go back to our browser, we refresh, and we click on submit. Now we can see that we have a margin here between the div holding these elements and the input field. So we've added the styles to this, and we've reduced the margin top to this footer. In this video, we want to go through adding the weather icons. So if we search for a city and we get the response, here what we want to do is add the icon peculiar to this weather condition. So we're going to add the icon here before this description. So before we add the icon, let's go to the openweathermap.org to see the icon lists. So if we go to the openweathermap.org, then into the API, then current weather data, then we can scroll down to lists of weather conditions. We look for lists of weather conditions. Here, list of weather condition codes. So we click on this link here. So we want to go through the weather icons. So as you know, for every response, we have a weather icon attached to it. As you can see, inside this weather array, then inside the object we have the icon with the code. So we want to get this icon, this code, then but display the image instead. So if we go down here, how to get icon URL. Now for each or for every icon code, we have the URL we can use in getting the icon to be displayed on the page. So the different icon lists, here we have the day icon, the night icon. So depending on the type of weather condition, the particular icon will be displayed as well. So to get the icon, if we click on this, here we can see the icon being displayed. And if you check the URL, we see openweathermap.org/img/w/ the icon then .png. That is the icon code .png. So for every icon we are going to retrieve, we'll always add the .png extension. So if we go back, we can see, you can go through it to see the different icons. Now to add that, we can just copy this first, then we go into our project inside the weather.js. we paste that here first because we're going to make use of this. But instead, we are not going to use this icon. We are going to retrieve the data. So we just take this out. And recall that whatever we are going to add would also add this .png extension to it. So we'll just take this out for now. As I said earlier, if we go back, we want to add the icon here. We want the icon to be displayed before this description. So we go back. To add that, we add the icon here in between this closing strong tag and this text. So to do that, we add the image tag. Now inside the image tag, we add the source, and the source is going to be what we have here. So the source is what we have here. We copy this and we paste inside. Now we have the source, but now we need to get the image. Now to get the image, recall that we used we got the image by saying data.weather, then add the index.icon. So data.weather.icon. Then the next thing is we need to add the .png extension. So we say .png. Then we close. So with this, we've added the weather icon. If we go back to the page, if we can go back to the API, then right here inside the response, you can see we're getting the weather icon here, weather.icon. So if we just use weather.icon, we are just only going to get the ID. But if you add, make the call using the openweathermap.org/img/w, then you are going to placing it inside an image tag. Then it's going to get the image itself. So here we are getting the data, then adding the .png extension. So let's save, then go back and we'll refresh. So if we check tallying and we get the response, now we can see the icon here being displayed before the description. So let's check for another city, London. Now we see the icon. So depending on the description, the weather description, the icon peculiar to that will be displayed. If we go to Ghent in Brussels, you see clear sky and we're having this. So let's try another, say Oslo, having clear sky as well. Lagos, scattered clouds. So you can see the icons. So we've been able to add the icons to this description. So you can go back to and see how it was done. We used this source and added the data.weather.icon, then with the .png extension. So with this, we've added the icons. We'll continue in the next video. Hello. So we've been able to add the functionality to the current.html. From this index page, we can click here and it will take us to the current.html page. So here we added the navbar, the jumbotron. We also added the footer to the page, and we're going to be able to reuse this footer in other pages. And also we added the input field and the button. So we can search for weather information of any city by typing the name of the city into the search or input box, and it's going to return the information. So here we have the current weather for Tokyo, Japan. We have the weather, the description, the temperature, pressure, humidity, minimum temperature, maximum temperature, wind speed, and the wind direction. And also we have the units of the different data. So we've gotten the data for current weather, and this information is the current weather information for Tokyo, Japan. So in the next section, we're going to work on getting weather forecast for any city, and we're going to do that also based on city name. So the API call we'll make will be based on the city name. If we go to the open weather map page, here we can see that we can get weather forecasts, 5-day and 3-hour forecast, 16-day and daily forecast. So we're going to use this, either this or the 5-day or the 16-day, to get the weather forecast. And we're going to do that maybe getting only the temperature or the pressure, because if we want to get the weather forecast for 16 days, and if we decide to return all of this data, it will return the weather for 16 days, the description for 16 days, the temperature for 16 days, and so on. So it's going to be, the data that will be returned will be very large. So instead, we're going to search or get return data for maybe only the temperature or only the pressure. So we're going to start working on the forecast in the next section. Hello and welcome to this section. So in this section, before we start building the forecast.html, we go through what we're going to do in this section. Here, as we did in the index page and also in the current.html page, we have the navbar. Then we have this jumbotron with its styles. Then here, instead of just searching, getting the data or weather forecast by city name only, we are also adding another field whereby the user can input the number of days by which they want to get the weather forecast. Here, we are just using an input field. On your own, you can decide to use an input field of type number instead of an input field of type text. But here, the minimum number the user can input is 1, and the maximum number is 16. Then here we have the header for the table. What we are going to do in this section is the table data. We are going to be dynamically adding the table data depending on the number the user inputs here. So if the user inputs 3, then we're going to get 3 rows with table data. If the user inputs 7, we're going to get 7 rows or 7 table data here. So what we are doing in this section is we're going to get weather forecast data using the open weather map API to get the forecast. So if we search for a city like Tokyo and we search for 7 days, so it's going to give us the icon, the weather info, the weather description, the morning temperature, the night temperature, minimum temperature, maximum temperature, the pressure, humidity, wind speed, and wind direction for 7 days of the city Tokyo. So we click on search city, then it's going to display the results. So here we are getting all of this information for the city Tokyo. Here's a weather forecast for Tokyo, Japan. So we are going to see how to use the Ajax method to send a request and get this data, or make the API call to the open weather map API. Then we're going to retrieve this data. So this is what we are going to do in this section. If we go into our project, this is the forecast.html. We're going to write this code as well as we did for the index and also for the current .html page. Then for the forecast.js, this is the jQuery code we are going to write. We're also going to write all of this from scratch. Here we are dynamically adding the table data to the page. So we are going to do this in this section. So in the next section, we'll start working on the forecast.html page. Hello and welcome. In this video, we want to start working on the forecast.html page. Right now we have the index page. Also we have the current.html page. where the results we get for the current data from the Open Weather Map API is being displayed. So what we want to do now is we want to work on the forecast.html. We have the link, but we don't have any HTML in the page, or we don't even have the page right now. So let's go into our project. Now inside in the root directory, we create a new file and call it forecast.html. So we have the page right now, forecast.html. So if we go back, we refresh and we click on the forecast, it's going to take us to this page now with the error that was here telling us cannot get the page is gone. So now what we want to do is just copy what we have inside the current.html page, copy all of it, then paste in the forecast.html. Now we start here, we change this, we can just add this to forecast. Then also we leave the nav bar. Then we change this from get current weather info to get weather forecast. Now after doing this, the next thing we want to do is we want to change first the ID. So we can change it to submit forecast. So we have this right now. We can go back to our browser, refresh the page. Right now we can see we have this for get weather forecast. But what we want to do here and what we want to do differently for this forecast is we don't only want the user to input the city name, but also we want them to add the number of days by which they want to get the forecast. Because in the Open Weather Map, they have the 5-day forecast and the 16-day forecast as well. So the user will be able to input a number between 1 and 16, maximum of 16 and a minimum of 1, to give them the number of forecast if you are using the daily forecast for the 16-day. So what we're going to do is just include another input field here. So we go back, we copy this field, paste it down here. So we change this to days and also to days. Then we can change this text we have here to number of days. Number of days. So we have this right now. So let's go back, we refresh, and now we can see we have the input field. So we can decide to use a number here, the HTML type of number, or we could just use the type text. So the user will input a value and we can just include here and say minimum is 1 and maximum is 16. So we specify that to the user. So minimum is 1 and maximum is 16. So we could just decide to, so that the user will be able to see the number. So we just put number, and so number minimum 1 and maximum 16. So we have this right now for the user. What we are going to do here is, you recall for the current.html, if we try to search for a city, now we have the data for the weather, the description, all being displayed at once. But for the forecast, if we go to the forecast, the results will not be displayed in the same way, because we are getting the forecast and we have 5-day forecast and 16-day forecast in the Open Weather Map API. So if we search for temperature, for example, we want to get the temperature for the forecast, we specify and we're using 16-day forecast, then it's going to return the temperature for 16 days. We do the same for pressure. We want to get the pressure, or we want to get the data for the pressure using the 16-day forecast. It's going to also return the result for 16 days. So what we are going to do for this, the way we are going to return the result is we're going to use a table. So we're going to return the table, we're going to return the value or display the value inside the table. So in this case, we're going to use a table that in it will have the temperature, the minimum temperature, the maximum temperature, the humidity, and every other data we want to return. But in this case, they'll be returned inside the table. So we're going to start working on that in the next video. In the last video, we added the form or the forecast.html page, and we also added the input fields for name of city, number of days, and the button. So before we start working on this, let's just go to the open weather map page to see how the API for the weather forecast works. So we go to our browser and we enter open weather map. So it's going to take us to the openweathermap.org page. So we click on the API. Now when we worked on the current weather data, we use this API doc for the current weather data. But now we want to look at the weather forecast. First, let's just see for this 5-day, 3-hour forecast. We click on this API doc. Here, it returns data in JSON or XML formats. But the 5-day forecast is available at any location or city. It includes weather data every 3 hours. Here, we also make the same API calls, like API calls by city name, by city ID, by geographical coordinates, that is the longitude and the latitude. But as I said, we are going to be making the API call by city name. Here, if you look at it, it's a little bit different. For the current weather, if we go back, click here and go to the API. For the current weather, here we are getting the data, weather, and this query. But for forecasts, instead of weather, we replace it with forecast, then with the query. So we go down, it returns the data in JSON formats or in XML formats. So also we can get the city ID, city name, the city coordinates. Then we can get the count, also as well as the lists main, where we get the temperature, the minimum temperature, the maximum temperature, the pressure, the sea level, ground level, humidity. Then also we get the weather description, icon, and the rest. So we can use this to get the data. Then if you go down, there is for the XML formats, we can do the same using all of these parameters to get the data. But also there's something very important that we need to see. For the formats, we know it uses the JSON, XML, but HTML. Then we go down here. Here that says limitation of results. It says to limit number of listed cities, we use the count parameter that specifies the number of lines returned. So if you want to specify the number of weather forecast data to be returned, you use this count variable. So if you want to get the data for 3 days, you add count equals to 3. If you want to get weather for 10 days, you add this count and make it equal to 10. So it's going to return the data for 10 days. So in our own forecast, we're going to be including this count variable. So the user will specify whatever the user inputs here, that is what will be added to this count variable. So we need to note that. And also the format still remains the same. We have the standard, the metric, and the imperial. So if you want to return and take, for example, the temperature in Celsius, we use the metric. If we want to return in Fahrenheit, we use the imperial. But if we do not specify the units, then it's going to return the temperature in Kelvin, which is this standard. So let's test it out to see how it works. Let's just use this API call. We copy this out, then open a new page, we paste. But we can't use it because we don't have API key. So I think I have my API key. Let me just copy from here. then I add it. Now note here we're getting the forecast for the city London. Then the mode is going to be returned in the XML format. So if we don't specify this mode, it will return it in JSON, but in this case it's going to return it in XML format. Then the API key. Now this is going to return the 5-day forecast, and we're going to see the data that will be returned. Now we are not specifying any count variable. We are not specifying any count, so it's going to return the 5-day forecast in XML format. So let's see how the data looks. And now this is it. We can see that we have so much data returned. But if we go into it, here it returns the name, the country, the location, that is the longitude, the latitude, and the altitude as well. Collapse this. Then if you see from here, the sunrise, sunset. Now today's dates and the time. So starting from here, you can see it's returning the time. Right now it's returning starting from 6 a.m. on 29th to 9 a.m. on 29th as well, because it's here it says it includes weather data every 3 hours. So if we go here, it's returning the data every 3 hours. So between 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. this is the data that is being returned. This is the weather forecast. Then between 9 a.m. and 12 noon, this is the weather forecast data. So it's returning the data every 3 hours. Here we did not specify the count variable. So if we collapse this, the next from 12 noon to 3 p.m. this is the weather forecast, and it's getting the name, also these values. You get the wind direction, the wind speed, the temperature, the pressure, the humidity. Then from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. and this is just for 29th of November. Then after this, it will then move to a new date. Let's find where it moves to. Here on the 30th. So starting from 30th, 12 midnight to 3 a.m. it returns the data. Then from 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. then from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. so it returns the data. After, when it gets to 12 midnight for 30th, it will move to the next day. So here we return the 5-day forecast, but the data is being returned for every 3 hours. So this is for the 5-day 3-hour forecast. We return the data in XML format. So now if we go down here and we decide to add a count variable, let's get this count variable here. Okay, if we go down here, we just add this count equals to 3. Let's just add a count variable and see how it works. So let's say 2. Okay, now we can see it just returns the data for 2 days, 29th and here it just returns the data from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. then from 9 a.m. to it just returns the data for just 2 hours. Not 2 hours, sorry, for 6 hours. So between 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. then 9 a.m. to 12 noon. So it returns the data for 6 hours. But if we decide to go with XML, let's see the JSON format instead of this XML. Let's see how the JSON format looks. Now we can see the JSON format. So it returns the data for the same number of hours as well. So for 29th here, 29th between 6, let's see, so we get the correct time. So you can just go through it to see the number of hours. Here we can see from 9 it returns the data, then also for 12 noon for the same day it returns the data as well. So we can use this count variable here to specify the forecast, the number of forecasts that we want the data for. So this is how it works. It works pretty much the same as the current weather data, but the only difference is we are not using this data, this weather here. Instead we are using the forecasts, and we can also specify the number of forecasts using the count variable. So this is how it works. Even if we go for the 16-day forecast as well, here for the 16-day forecast it works the same. So let's copy this. Then we go down here, paste, but before that let's get the API key. Then we add the API key, and let's see how it looks. Now for this case here, it's returning the data for 7 days. As you can see here, it's returning the data for 7 days, from 29th of November to 5th of December. You can see it's returning the data. But when we did for the 5-day, it was returning the data for every 3 hours. From the 29th, from the time which you try or send the request, it's going to return the data after every 3 hours. So, but for the 16-day forecast, we are just returning from 29th to 5th. So you can see the difference. Let's take out this XML format. Here the same, so it's returning the data for 29th, then 30th, 31st, and just like that. So this is how it works, and it works pretty much the same as the current weather data. So in the next video we are going to see how we can create the jQuery function that will allow us to get this data. In the last video, we added the forecast.html page and also added the 2 input fields for city name and number. So what we want to do in this video, we want to add the table heads, because we are going to be displaying our results in a table. We're not just going to display the way we did for the current weather data. Well, before we add the table heads, let's go into the openweathermap.org. Right inside the page, we click on the API. It will take us to this page. Here we have the 5-day 3-hour forecast and the 16-day daily forecast. What we are going to be making use of is the 16-day daily forecast. Now if you open this on a different page and click on this API doc for the 16-day daily forecast. Now the difference between the 5-day 3-hour forecast and the 16-day daily forecast, if you look at the API call for the 16-day, we have the forecast/daily, because we are getting the data or a daily forecast. Whereas for the 5-day, we don't have that daily value here. So we are getting the results is going to be returned after every 3 hours. So we are only going to be making use of the 16-day daily forecast. Now before we continue, let's go down to the JSON parameters, because we are returning our data in JSON. So we are going to use the JSON parameters. What we want to get or add as our headers, or in our table heads, we add the weather icon, we add the weather description, we add the weather main as well. We're going to add the list.pressure, the list.humidity. Then for the temperature, we have different temperature values. We have the temperature, day temperature, minimum temperature, maximum temperature, night temperature, evening temperature, and morning temperature. So, but what we just only want to do is we want to get maybe the morning temperature and the night temperature. as well as the minimum temperature and the maximum temperature. Then we get the city name and the city country as well. So we're going to do that. Let's go into our forecast.html to add the table. Now here, if we go down, we're not going to make use of this ID or this div. So let's take it out. Let's add another div with class row. Now inside this div, we are going to add the table, but here we are going to add only the table heads, whereas for the table data, it will be dynamically generated when we write our jQuery code. So here we just add the table, and inside the table we are going to have the bootstrap class of table bordered. Then the first thing is to add the table head. Inside the table head, we have the table row. Then what we want to do, add different table heads as well. So the first one is the icon. We're adding the table the weather icon. Then the next one is the weather. Then we are adding the description. Then after the description, we add the morning temperature. We say morning temperature. Then we add the night temperature. You can go on your own. If you go back, you can see we have morning temperature, night temperature, day temperature, evening temperature. So here I'm just only getting the morning temperature and the night temperature. Then after that, we add minimum temperature, then add the maximum temperature, then also add the pressure, then add the humidity, then we add the wind speed and the wind direction. So these are the data that we want to display. So when we start writing our jQuery code, we are going to dynamically get the table data. So we'll just only add the table body here, and we give it an ID. So I'll call it forecast weather. So with this ID, we are going to add the table data inside of this table body. So with this, we've added the table heads. If we go back to our page, we refresh, and here we can see the table head. So the icon will be displayed here, the weather, the description of the weather, the morning temperature, the night, minimum temperature, maximum temperature, pressure, humidity, wind speed, and wind direction. You can add as much data as you want to add. So when we write our jQuery code, we'll see how we can generate that data and display them here. So in the next video, we'll start working on the jQuery code to retrieve the data and display inside the table. In the last video, we added the table heads where we are going to display our results. So in this lecture, we want to start working, add our jQuery code. Let's get straight into it. We go into our page. Here, we can either decide to write the code inside this weather.js, but to make things very easy, let's just create a new JS file. So we call it forecast.js. So it's going to be for the forecast.html. Then inside the forecast.html, we go down, we change this to forecast. So to include the file. So we have the forecast.js. So first, we get the document ready as usual. So say document.ready, then function. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a function first, but before then we add a click event to this ID. So we use this ID to add a click event to the button. So submit. So here we just add this. So add the ID dot click. So as we did with the current.html, let's just create a function, then we'll return the function. So we'll say function, we call it get forecast. So then we're going to return this function here. We can decide to write all of our codes inside this click function here, but let's just do it outside, but just return this get forecast. So right now we have this. So the first thing we need to do, we need to get the values from the fields. So if you go back, we want to get the value from the name or city name field and the number. So we go back here and create a variable. We create a variable and we call it city equal, then we get, so say city dot val. We're getting the value. Then for days variable, so say days equal to, we get the number of days dot val. Now, after doing this, we also, as we did with weather.js, where we use this Ajax call, so we're going to use the Ajax call here as well. But first, we're going to check to make sure that the fields are not empty. If city is not equal to empty, and days is not equal to empty. So we do this, then else. So for the else, let's just go ahead and copy so that we don't forget. So let's just copy this statement here, then we add here. Okay, so we know we are not going to forget that. Now the next thing we want to do is make the Ajax call. So Ajax, then inside we add this. Then the first call we want to make is the URL. The first parameter is the URL. So to get the URL, let's just go over to our browser. Here we can just copy this, copy what we have here, then paste inside. But before we paste inside, we can just add the HTTP here. Now, so what we want to change, we are taking out this because we're not using the XML. Instead, we are using the JSON. So here first we replace this London with the city name. So we replace with the city name. Then the next thing we want to do is add the units, and it's going to be metric. So we do the same here. Then for the count we add the ampersand, but before then we add the so then it's going to be CNT equal. So we close this, then we add the days, then we add the API key. So add our API key. So let's just go here, we copy the API key, from here, then we paste inside. So we have the API key. So here what we did, we added, so here we're making use of the CT, the count which we're getting from these values, and also we added the API key. Now the next thing is we add the type, which is get, and also the data type. Data type we are sending is, or getting, is JSON-P, which stands for JavaScript Object Notation Padding. Then success, which is the function, and we pass the data. So with this is the parameters we are using in the Ajax request. So we're going to stop here. In the next video, we'll start adding the codes inside of this success function. So we want to continue from where we stopped in the last video. We added the Ajax request with the URL, the type, the data type, and the success call. So to start working on adding the code to get the data from the API, the first thing we want to do, since I said here in the focus.html, I said we are going to dynamically add the table data into this table body with ID forecast weather. We only added the table heads. So we go back here. First thing, let's create a variable. We'll create a variable called table, set it equal to empty. Then what we want to do, for us to get the data that we want, if we go back to this page, if we want to get the data, we have to create a loop to loop through the array and also inside the objects as well. So for this list, inside this list, we are going to loop through the list to get all the results. So the first thing, we are going to use the for loop. So the for loop we're going to use, we create the variable, say for variable I equal to 0. So we want to use the for loop to loop through this data.list. We don't want to return the values the way we did here, whereby we created a function. We're going to do all of that inside this for loop. So, and recall that the result is being stored inside this data. If we go back to the weather.js, here you can see the results stored inside the data. Then we made the call by saying data dot the result that we want to get. So the same here, to get the results for temperature and every other data, we are going to loop through, then we return the results. Since we are returning results for forecast and it's going to be at most 16 days, so we are going to use a for loop to loop through and return the results. So we say for variable I equals 0, then I less than data dot list. Now this list is the list we are obtaining here. Then the data is the result here as well. Then the next thing, we increment I. So we create a for loop, variable I equals 0, I less than data here dot list from the API. Then we increment I. Now another thing, since we already have this variable, we need to create a row for it. So we do by incrementing here, then we say table row. Then we can close this table. Let's close this table row here. So we close the table row. So every of our data will be placed inside this head. So the next thing we want to do here, So what this is going to do for every data that will be returned, it's going to create this table row, then give us or return the data inside the table data we are going to add as well. So the first thing we want to return here, if we go back to our forecast page, we want to return the results for the icon, because here we have the icon. So we're going to return the weather.icon. So to do that, we say table, then plus equal, we create the table head or the table data td, then we can close the table data as well, then slash td. So we close the table data. Now what we want to do now here is we are going to say plus data dot list, then we're going to add the index I. We are using this index I, then dot weather at index 0 as well. So if we go back to the page, let's go back to the page, we can see here that the list is returning an array. Then inside the array we have values and also different objects and also arrays as well. So here we are going to return array at this different indexes. So for the first one, we say data.list with the index dot weather, then index 0. So inside this weather array, we just have one object which occupies the index 0 dot icon. So we return the data for this. Then we do the same. The next data we want to return is the weather and the weather description. So this is going to be list, then main, then this is going to be description. So we can go ahead and see how it looks before we continue. But first, before we do that, we need to add this into the HTML. Inside this HTML ID, this element with this ID. So we say, then we add the ID dot HTML, then we add table, which holds the results that we are getting. So we have this. The next thing we want to do is, let's just go to our browser, refresh the page, then let's add Tallinn 3 days. Okay, we're not getting any results, so let's see if we have an error. It's not returning any error, so we're going to find out the reason why the results are not being displayed. So we'll go back. Okay, let's see. Okay, here we are not including dot length. It's supposed to be dot length. So data dot list dot length. So we come here, we add the length, then we refresh the page. But before then, let's just go ahead. So we just clean, empty the form fields. Then it's going to be empty form field. Then we do the same for this. We empty the form field or the input field. So we come here, we refresh. So if we add Tallinn, let's add 5 days. Now we see that we returned the data for 5 days. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now here we are just having the value. Later we are going to add the image tag, so that we are going to display the image or the images here. Then if we type London 10 days, let's type 10 days. Here we can see that we are returning the result for 10 days. But if we type anything above 16, because we are using 16-day forecast, so we say Tallinn, if we type anything above 16, it doesn't have results for 16 days, so it's just going to return 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's just going to return results for 7 days. So anything above 16, it will only return results for 7 days. So let's just go ahead, add maybe the morning temperature and the night temperature. To get the morning temperature, we use list.temp.mon. So we just copy this. So we use list.temp.mon .temp.mon for morning temperature, and it's going to be, we add degree, yeah, so this is going to give us the degree Celsius sign. Then night, we have that as well. And the next one we want to add is the minimum temperature, the maximum temperature. So here we'll say max. Then if we go back, let's refresh the page. Now let's add a city, 7 days. Now we can see the results. We have the morning temperature, the night temperature, the minimum temperature, the maximum temperature. Here we don't have any data because we are not retrieving the data yet. So let's just quickly add this other data here. So we go back, then we go, if we go to a page to get the pressure, humidity, list.pressure, list.humidity, then list.speed, list.degree to get the direction. So this is going to be list.pressure, list.humidity, then list.wind speed or speed, list.speed, then list.degree, which is going to give us the direction. So here we just take this out. So for the speed, the unit is always in meter per second. Then for humidity, the unit is in percentage. Then for pressure, it's in hectopascal. So hectopascal. So we have the results now. We're getting all of these results. Let's go back to see how it looks. So let's add Madrid, 3 days. Now we see the results we are obtaining. We have the pressure, the humidity, the wind speed, and the wind direction. Since we have a mistake here, let's fix that. That should be under OK here. So we'll refresh the page. New York, 8 days. Now we are getting this result. Here we have a problem with the height of the container. We're going to fix that later. But here you can see that we are getting the results as we want. So we don't want this in Celsius. It's just going to only be in degree, 4 days. So as you can see here, we are getting all of this data. So here we've been able to get the data that we want and display them inside the table. For weather or description, temperature, for the morning temperature, we are getting the forecast for 4 days. So for the next 4 days, we are getting this temperature. So for 29th, 30th, 1st, 2nd, these are the morning temperatures for Tallinn. Then these are the night temperatures, the minimum, the maximum temperatures, the pressure, humidity, wind speed, and wind direction. So we've been able to display the results inside the table. So in the next video, we are going to add this so that it's going to display the image. We add an image tag to display the icon here in this cells. So we'll do that in the next video.